Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are running into our player props video here for Friday night on this NBA postseason slate, as we have 3 games to look at here and choose from. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to check out each and every one of these playoff videos we'll bring for you, including those weekend ones. And these player props video will continue to bring you each and every day that we have postseason games. Make sure you head to thelines.com, check out that props tool. Make sure you're line shopping the best odds available out there from those odds makers. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or a DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for tonight's play props. Nate, let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Heat and playoff Jimmy Butler, big game James now. But I'm not going to be a total fish and chase the points after he goes off for playoff career high 45. He's a guy who will do whatever it takes to win. And I'm actually, not looking at the straight points prop. I'm actually looking at his assists tonight, which is minus 150 for him to get 5. That's terrible value. If you just go up one more, plus 126 at FanDuel for 6 assists. And then I really like the juice, 8 assists in a win at plus 720. You might think like, well, Jimmy Butler's not a point guard. He's not going to get 8 times. Not so fast, Sparky. Since the 2020 finals started, he's averaging 8.3 assists per game in the playoffs, playing 41 minutes, also getting 23.5 points, 8 rebounds in those playoff games. So the assists or the 36.5 points, rebounds, assists, because you just don't know where it's coming from Jimmy, but he's going to lead this team again with Bam Adebayo questionable. He's hurting. He might play, but he might play a limited role. Yeah. Tyler Hero still hasn't gotten on track in the series, and Kyle Lowry is deferring at this point in his career. So it's Jimmy's team, and we know what he did in game 2, 45 points, 0 turnovers, 0 fouls, which is just a ridiculously in control type performance. He has a 32% usage rate in this series now. And a plus 46 plus minus. And in 14 games without Bam, I mean, I think Bam's going to play, but this is just an indication of Jimmy playing a larger role as facilitator, averaging 24 points per game, 7.5 dimes with a 131 offensive rating, and his usage rate goes up about 3%. Atlanta also gave up the 3rd highest assist to turnover ratio this season, and Jimmy, like I mentioned, 0 turnovers despite having the ball in his hands all the time, has 10 dimes in several of those playoff games since the 2020 finals. So 8 dimes in a win is not that out of the question.
Yeah, and the reason I don't like taking Jimmy during the season is his usage rate doesn't remain consistent. You never know what type of performance he's going to bring in terms of, is he going to defer? Is he going to, act like a star? And in the playoffs, it's the complete opposite. You know what you're getting from Jimmy, and it's actually, like you said, it's just an more under control Jimmy. And a huge reason for that in this series is there's no Clint Capella. So like we said before game 1 even happened, Jimmy and Bam are going to be walking themselves into the paint, doing whatever they want from there. So whether or not Jimmy scores once he gets into that paint, or whether he just dimes somebody else up because they're now wide open as 2 people collapse on him, points and assists seem like they're going to be abundant for the man, whichever decisions he makes once he's, like I said, just skips into the lane at his will and does whatever he wants, because Okongwu has a negative 39 net rating individually in the first 2 games. And that's their center. Gorgie Dang not playing. There's no height in there to deal with Jimmy. So love that bet. I am going to take the guy who's probably going to try to guard him a bunch, though. That's Bogdanovic there for Atlanta, over 16.5 points. This is something that we targeted a bunch last season when we were, if Bogey's props are going to be less than 18, 19.5, then we've got to look at it because that's what he does in the playoffs, is about 18 points a game. In his last 5 specifically, almost 21 points a game, 3.5 boards and 3.5 assists. So I think you could also consider the points, rebounds, and assists. It is the same juice there in terms of minus 102 at FanDuel for him to either hit 17 points or the 24 points, rebounds, and assists combined. But I like either of them, as he's doing that in his last bunch of playoff games, even in this series. And I think at home he's been a little bit better as well. 17.5 points at home versus 15 on the road, with some better shooting splits and shooting about 46.5% from 3 at home, making almost 4 of 8 basically quickly from deep there. So I think there's some good reason to like him in a game that I don't know if the Hawks are going to be able to pull one out and keep this a series. But I think they're going to keep it closer than they have in the first two. And Bogey's offense at home is going to be a big reason for that.
Yeah, it's all about offense from Bogdanovic, who every time Jeff Van Gundy talks about him goes, a very talented offensive player. He plays offense very well. Part of the reason Jimmy Butler scored 45, if you said he's going to spend some time guarding him. But Jimmy couldn't do anything with him in game two when he had a 28% usage rate, went 5 for 10 from three, cruised past this total. It's surprising to see such good odds at just 17 points. Where he averaged, even in the regular season, 18 points per game since March 1. His usage rate continued to climb as Atlanta sought for that second score. And they're going to need a second score because of how bad Trae Young has been against Miami and just how much attention and resources they throw at him. So that's why we like Bogey here more than Trae. Not willing to take the over or under for Trae Young because he is a wild card. And the Hawks will go as he goes, but they're better at home and they're much better offensively at home. Same thing with the Chicago Bulls here, much better offensively at home all season. And DeMar DeRozan coming off a huge game two with 46, bounced back from that dud in game one. And now he gets to face Milwaukee without Chris Middleton. Look, in his last 11 before the series started against Milwaukee, he was averaging 30 at 51.5% field goal shooting. So for him to get 30 at -108, I still like that. I really like the series long bet if you can find that at the book of your choice. He's plus 210 to lead this series in scoring. And Giannis is the main competition. Right now, Giannis has one more point than DDR, despite that dud in game one where he shot 6 for 25. He's never going to do that again. I mean, he's in total command of the mid-range game. And Chris Middleton tried to keep him in check here against Chicago. When they played Chicago 4 times, he had a 104 off defensive rating. So Drew Holiday can't necessarily spend all his time on DeRozan. Milwaukee's going to need his offense more, Drew. So I think DDR keeps cooking, gets 30 at home, where he posted a 32.5% usage rate at home this season, and it went up to 35% when he played Milwaukee those 4 times because he's their best option. He had 40 in the last home game with no Zach LaVine against the Bucks, but LaVine's still not fully healthy, so it's going to be a lot of DDR, especially down the stretch.
Agree, man. Yeah, and it's part of the game theory that we talked about in the video, the game video about the Bulls and Bucks, where we said, Drew Holiday was exhausted in game 2. They need his offense even more now in game 3 than they did in games 1 and 2, which he didn't really bring. And part of that is because he's chasing DeMar DeRozan all over the floor. It was either him or Chris Middleton. And so, I think it's interesting. There's one less defender now on DeMar DeRozan, but we're also saying the Bucks are likely going to take the other one off him more. And I just think they don't really have a choice. Now, they need a double, but I would rather leave Drew on somebody else and have him play more free safety if I'm Bud. And then, have 2 other guys coming at DeMar and not as worried about Zach LaVine, who at this point just don't let him stand in a catch and shoot wide open from 3 because he doesn't have the explosiveness that he normally does to be able to worry about off the dribble. Maybe he'll be healthier by this next game, but until I see it from LaVine, I don't believe it yet since he does look hurt. But let's finish up with a guy I'm taking because of Booker's injury. I talked about in the video, there's a bunch of guys you can choose from. If Cam Johnson had props available, which I don't know why he doesn't, then I would take those because the man goes up by 5 points per game when Booker doesn't play. He's the one whose stats seem to be affected the most by either one of CP3 or Booker not playing, right? He gets 5 more minutes a game, etc. I can't get his props, so I'm not talking about them right now, but if I could, I would talk about them. That said, CP3 is also a great bet without Booker, and CP3 in the playoffs is also a great bet without Booker. I'm looking at him, obviously, either points and assists or points. The points and assists are a bit better value at FanDuel, 32.5 combined gets you -115. We're looking at 20.5 points, which normally would scare me with CP3 when you look at him diming and all over the place and really controlling an offense a bit more. But I think this is a situation where if it's the fourth quarter and they need scoring, he'll be putting the ball up and getting his a bit more than he's trying to find others, even though I think he'll be doing both. So I think there's good reason to like him in this one without without Book to get those, roughly 22 points, let's say 11 assists or so. I think that's a reasonable line for him, and that's Vegas has said it correctly. But I still think it's a situation where because of the times that he finds himself in, he really needs to pull through in this one, and he will make that happen.
Yeah, there's some interesting specials on DK for him to have 25 points, 14 dimes. Look, he averages like 17 dimes against New Orleans since Willie Green took over. It's not out of the question at all. It's plus 600 for that to happen. I like these 3-point specials, DK too, for him to hit 3 threes, CJ to hit 3 threes. The problem is Mikal Bridges has to hit 3 threes for you. But that's plus 1,900, and Bridges is going to get a few more attempts. He's usually around only 4 or 5 attempts in the playoffs from deep. So that's going to need some extra help to hit, but the odds are very juicy. Look, I just expect CP3 to be pulling a lot more and pull more from deep as he knows what he has to do to get this team over the hump. So I definitely like the points and assists as the ball be in his hands constantly here.
Fuck it, man. Like, we don't know how to bet this game. Let's just go buck wild. I also really like the other DK special that I was considering before you started bringing up these DK specials. I was like, I'm not going to talk about this. This is silly. But Ingram, McCollum, and Chris Paul all get 25 points. That's plus 550.
Yeah.
Why can't that happen? I mean, Ingram plus 25, I really like, to be honest. CJ, I'd like him in the 20s. 25 that's the only one I'm worried about. I like the CP3 Ingram 25 points each kind of bet. So yeah, there's some fun to be had with this, man. If you think there's going to be some sort of bizarro stats with a crucial guy missing from this game in Booker, really on both sides of the floor, there could be some fun, wacky things happening tonight.
Yeah, very interesting slate. I mean, once again, you got the 3 favorites as tiny favorites on the road here. Miami being the most whole of the 3. As you mentioned, Bam is questionable, but he played through that issue for 24 minutes in game 2, and they still won. Miami minus 1.5 at Atlanta. That total at 221.5. Then the Bucks were going to be without Chris Middleton for a couple weeks if they can keep playing. Minus 2.5 at Chicago. That total at 222. And then the Suns were going to be without Devin Booker for a few weeks. Minus 2 at the Pelicans. Total all the way down at 216 there. Look, Miami is probably the most confident I would be of the 3 because of what I just said. I mean, they can quest on without Bam, and Bam is obviously has a chance to play, whereas the other 2 are going to be missing integral pieces of their lineup. It's interesting that the Miami's, willing to list a few guys questionable in a playoff series. Kind of shows you what they think of their opponent, an opponent that they have basically just handled all season. I mean, they did drop one game by 2 points, but they actually beat Atlanta twice without Bam, once without Bam and Jimmy, and out-rebounded them by 17 in that game. With Yurt season, our boy Omer Yurt 7 going for a 13, 10, and 6 line, pretty much just filling right in for Bam. And then 2 nights later, 17, 11, and 4. Clint Capella missed both those games, and Atlanta will not have him. So, I mean, that's the key reason right there that the line should not really be a toss-up like it is, because the Hawks don't have a replacement for Capella, so to speak, and John Collins is not even healthy. He's just played in these 2 playoff games, but he's doing what he can here. And Atlanta now dropped 5 of their last 8 regular season games without Capella. Their defensive rating is 3 points worse without him. During the regular season against Miami, a 121 defensive rating, and they shot 34% from 3. And now they're facing, Miami was the 3rd best 3-point defense on the road all season. And now they're in playoff mode, Miami, and they held Atlanta to 22 for 76 from deep. That's 29% in these first 2 games. This is a Hawks team that absolutely depends on the 3 ball. They had the 2nd best percentage on the year from deep. And the quality of shots they were getting, Josh, are not at all what you want. I mean, Miami, this is what they do. Just like the Bucks, they're going to try to force you into bad shots or force guys that they want to take threes into taking threes. And Bogdanovic hit a bunch of those in game 2. Yeah. I mean, he was just feeling himself. I don't know if he can sustain that, to be honest. He's dealing with an ankle injury as well, I believe. And we talk about it every time these teams meet. Trae Young really struggles against Miami. And while he finally found the rhythm scoring, got to 25 points in game 2, 10 turnovers, now averaging over 6 turnovers per game in his last 10 versus Miami with a 103 offensive rating. And last year he was heroic on the road. At home, his averages took a big dip in the playoffs, and I don't think he's going to be able to put this team on his back. I don't think Atlanta is that good, frankly. I mean, definitely not without some of their staples, like I mentioned, being injured or out. They actually lost 8 of their last 11 against Eastern Conference teams that are in the playoffs, and that includes a couple to the Bulls when the Bulls were just reeling. So, I mean, Miami with their championship aspirations and their championship level depth, like Tyler Hero hasn't even gotten going yet. Jimmy Butler just put the offense on his back last game. Kyle Lowry just being consistent, but he can step up if called upon. I think Miami has too much for Atlanta to deal with, and we could be looking at a sweep.
Yeah, it just seems like it. It does feel like the two series that you now feel the most comfortable with are with the two teams who, unfortunately, are the worst because they don't have their players. Denver in the West, as we record this, down, I believe, 10.5 to the Dubs. They're without all their stars. Same situation with Atlanta. I mean, they've had either a hobbled or no bogey for a while, and Clint Capella being out, right away in game 1. It really just kind of shut the door on the series as far as most people were concerned, as far as I was concerned, and why I felt so comfortable betting. I would never have felt comfortable betting Atlanta against Atlanta in game 2 if Clint Capella was close, was on the floor at all, just on the floor, just because I was scared as hell of Trae Young. And what he would do if he had his counterpart in a situation where he's on the road and he needs to win down 1-0. That's perfect Trae Young, bad guy on the road time. But I now feel very comfortable betting against Atlanta is the point, because that's not the case. And so I'm going to continue to do that. And even if Bam doesn't play, which let's say he does play, but the 24 minutes that he played last game, somewhat impactful, and definitely always, helpful, obviously, on defense. And the fact that Atlanta has nobody right now to fill in. Gorgie Dang only getting 6 minutes random time, and Okongwu has a negative 38 net rating in 2 games individually, worst on the team for sure. He was a negative 72 in 19 minutes in the first game, which really contributed to that being so bad. So that's really just why you can't you can't play him, and that everybody who's in the front court for the Heat at this point is going to eat we already saw it happen when it was Yurt's season, when he was going through, he was really, his coming out party was this game, and it was because it was sans Clint Capella, as this game is going to be once again. Just finishing the point about Bam, this is a very deep team. This is a very good team at every single position on every area of the court are the Miami Heat, and they can beat you with that 3 ball, which they'll continue to feel comfortable shooting, but they can beat you in a variety of ways with guys like Bam and Jimmy, who are so versatile and play so physically. Their defensive, they were 17-9 without Bam this season when he didn't play. Their defensive rating was only 1 point worse. Their offensive rating was actually 1 point better. I'm not really looking into that, but just saying. At this point, in 6 meetings with Atlanta, 3 of which have not had Bam Adebayo, their defensive rating is 104.7, giving up a 99.6 points a game, and 2 of those games were in Atlanta. So it's not like it's just because the Hawks are so much worse on the road on offense. That storyline doesn't really hold water for me once the playoffs start, other than the fact that you might be able to expect guys like Kevin Huerter to play better at home. But also he's got pretty even splits on the road in the playoffs dating back to last season. So this is really just a situation where they don't have enough at this point. It starts with their inability to bang down low with the Heat, to get boards, to ever get second chances, and to really free up Trae Young, just the way that they're just shutting them down. I mean, they're only shooting 28% from 3 are the Hawks in this series so far. And at this point in those 6 games, just 30% over, across all 6. So there's not much reason to. I think you start looking at ways to bet Miami in the series. The only 3 things worth looking at here are Miami if they win by in 5, that's plus 170. The sweep is plus 190. It gets interesting when you get to 4-2. If you like plus 450 for Miami to win in 6, if you think the Hawks have any chance to pull out a couple games, but I don't think this goes past 5. And the sweep in this one is just as likely as it is in that Warriors series against the Nuggets.
Yeah, only if you have the utmost faith in Trae Young and what he can do in what has been the worst possible matchup for him.
Yeah.
And the Hawks, yeah, I mean, they score 120 in wins, they score 107 in losses, I believe. And a lot of those inflated home numbers are when they're playing the dregs or teams that are not full strength, and not when they're playing the Miami Heat. I would take under on 110.5 for Atlanta and say they could even win and not get to that total. The way
They can put
Miami's
up a
playing,
stinker. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but I would be terrified to take Atlanta to win. I mean, Jimmy Butler, 45 points, 0 turnovers, 0 fouls.
Yeah.
That's a guy who's just completely in control of the game
100%.
and putting his stamp on this series right now. And then, like I said, yeah, Miami has dogs in waiting. Like PJ Tucker hasn't even been called upon to shut somebody down or, when needed. And again, yeah, if they key in on Butler, Tyler Hero can run the offense. Gabe Vincent is outplaying Trae Young at times. Like it's hashtag Heat culture. It's bananas. It's Eric Spoelstra's playoff scheme. It's everything you'd want to see if you're a Miami fan. And unless they have a big mental lapse, they should take a 3-0 lead and go for that 4 or 5 game sweep. But I think maybe the safest bet is just saying they will hold Atlanta under 110. The defense will come to play tonight.
A surprising 1-1 series, I would say. Milwaukee headed to Chicago now. As we mentioned, it is a 1-1 series. No Chris Middleton. So we've got a lot of Giannis and Drew Holiday in our future, I imagine. Pretty small spread here to start. I would also say a pretty decent total considering how offensive we consider these teams. So I'm not sure if we're looking over necessarily at this 222.5 or so. But where are you starting in terms of best bets with this one?
Yeah, I do like the over. It's dropped a little bit each game of the series, and I think went under by half a point last time out. I like the over because DeMar DeRozan is cooking now, and the Bulls offense much better at home. He has been really good against Milwaukee, with the exception of that awful game one. We don't really know what happened in the final 3 quarters of that game one, where Milwaukee's offense just tanked. But really the key is that without Middleton, they play faster. They have to play faster. Their half-court offense is not as good. You mentioned Pat Connaughton's going to be out there. He is a pace getter, straight line attacker. Wes Matthews is going to get more time. He has no conscience pulling from 3. And Giannis, of course, is going to try to put the team on his back. I just get the feeling that the defending champs are not going to – they're at least going to come out strong and win this first game when they know one of their big threes out. They know the numbers as much as anybody else, that they're only 25 and 22 without one of the big 3 since Drew Holiday came aboard. Yeah. Versus like 30 games above 500 when all of them play. And they're going to come out and try to prove that they can still beat this Bulls team, which, I mean, they owned prior to this slippage in game 2. We thought part of their slippage in game 1 was that they just didn't necessarily take this challenge too seriously. But I think Chicago has their attention now for sure. And that means Giannis is going to come out, dominate the paint, which he has over and over against this team. I mean, they had a 46-34 advantage on paint points, a 31-15 advantage on free throws. Just need to cut down on the turnovers and do a better job guarding the 3-point line, or hope for Chicago to start missing, as they went way above average in that game too. But Chicago's offense is much, much better at home, has been all season. 7 points per game more, 5 points higher per 100 possessions, and their defensive rating only 1 point better. What they give up is key for Milwaukee, 7th highest percentage off 2-pointers and the 8th most paint points, as well as being the 7th worst 3-point D. And that's all Milwaukee wants, is paint points or threes, with some of those guys filling in for Middleton I mentioned. Milwaukee went under steadily in the playoffs last year at home. They started in their last 8 playoff games on the road, though, against Brooklyn, Atlanta, and Phoenix, 3 teams that were pretty slow paced in the playoffs. They went over in 6 of those. I think this series has been played at the second fastest pace. And like I mentioned, their pace was up without Middleton. In their last 5 without Middleton, they averaged 122 at a 101 pace. So I think it's a pretty small total. I do like the Bucks to win. If you go money line and that total, you're about plus 200. it's a 2.5-point spread. I would feel fine going spread and the over at plus 250 at FanDuel. I think it's worth a bet.
Yeah, I'm here for that. I am. I think Chris Middleton, obviously, it's interesting in the playoffs. You don't always have a ton of new info to go off of. You can't necessarily just take the most recent game and use it to add to the bulk of stats that you might have from their season matchups, et cetera. But it's interesting that in this game, obviously, and then in that Suns game, we've got 2 stars missing for each team. Booker, obviously, probably more important to the Suns, which is a good sign for the Bucks. It's why they have, the depth that they have. And really the over, to your point, it's interesting. You have a great fourth quarter presence in Chris Middleton, who really helps you when you need one person with his hands on the ball, going to get his own shot. Yet still, you feel good about the over in this game because the pace is going to increase. It's almost like it's a bit more of small ball style without Chris Middleton, as he is the one guy that you give it to on the wing and say, go get a bucket. And there's not many other guys that you do that with. I mean, obviously Giannis, you put him in whatever position you want to put him in to go get a bucket. But we've seen that he's now going to be playing a little bit more back to the basket and a little bit less top of the key running downhill through 3 guys. So I think there's some reason to like the over for that. I also think the defense that Chris Middleton brings on DeMar DeRozan is important. I know it's mostly Drew Holiday taking him on, but that's the other person, obviously, that's matching up there with DeMar, which is obviously crucial as we saw what happened. So I think one other huge advantage that the Bulls are going to have now without Middleton is the fact that Drew Holiday looked so tired in this last game, and it's partly because he's chasing DeMar all over the court, running around at least one screen every single time on the wing or on the elbow, and trying to rise up against DeMar, who honestly at this point there's no one who's blocking his shot when he goes up for that 2-point mid range, where he's scoring 45% of his points in this series is from a 2-point mid range shot. 93% of them are from 2 points field goals as well. So I think that is becoming a thing for Drew Holiday. They obviously spent a lot of energy coming back in game 2, and that wasn't great for him. So I think overall, though, you're going to have to find other guys to take on DeRozan besides just Drew in this matchup, which means now you've got even more points, more opportunity for DeMar with worse defenders on him. You will need to, you're going to free up Drew hopefully a bit on defense, as, look, you need him to be able to score now, right? He wasn't even pulling those threes in a couple situations. He was pretty wide open in game 2, and he didn't even want to shoot it because he looked like he didn't have his legs under him. I mean, it was pretty obvious when he missed. They were coming back. There was about a 4-point gap that they finally cut it to in the fourth. Drew Holiday gets a steal, comes down, takes his defender on, misses a layup. He just missed a layup because he was just exhausted. Doubles over after that is just done, right? And so I think you can't continue to, if you're Bud, and we're wondering which playoff Bud is going to show up. We definitely don't talk about coaching that much, but I think in the playoffs with Bud, we're kind of reverting back to a kind of scratching our head, trying to understand why certain guys are getting the minutes that they're getting when you need more speed on the floor to be able to hang, or in at least length as well, with LaVine and DeMar able to shoot over smaller defenders and slower defenders. So there's going to have to be some rotation and something else figured out here, because game 2 wasn't just really a fluke and obviously a downturn when you lose Chris Middleton. They were already in trouble before he went out, and Bud did not make the necessary adjustments that I would feel comfortable with. It's kind of leading me to talk myself just strictly into an over, which I feel very comfortable about. It's just too low right now, and I think Chris Middleton's getting too much credit and not enough credit on defense, too much credit on offense, and that's leading to a low total. The 2.5, I would still feel better about the Bucks, but I mean, DeMar DeRozan and company are kind of in my head as well. Now they have my attention, right?
Yeah, it's over first for me, and you nailed it with Middleton, who had a 104 defensive rating against the Bulls in those 4 wins. That's why we're looking at a lot of DeRozan props, including plus 210 to lead this series in scoring. He has 1 point fewer than Giannis right now after an 18-point dud in game 1. And he had dropped 40 against the Bucks in one of the Bulls' 5 last home games here in the regular season. 4 of those 5 went over. DeMar had 40 without LaVine in the lineup. He should continue to get his. Bucks shot 53% from the floor. In Chicago, had 25 free throws. And the Bulls posted a 128 defensive rating in their last 5 home games. Drew Holiday is tired guarding DeRozan, and he's also got B Rabbit on him on the other end. Your boy Caruso.
Cheddar Bob.
And So I mean that is tough for him, but they still don't have any answers for Giannis. And let's be clear, this is the Finals MVP who is coming off a historic tear. That he's a big reason the last 4 games of the Finals all went over, and the Bucks went over in 6 of their last 8 because there are no answers for him. He can just go down to the block, get you a shot, or get a wide open shot for one of those guys on the wing. And yeah, I mean, if you want to bury Bud, if they lose this series or lose early, that's fine. But I would attack the GM. Why did you get rid of Dante DiVincenzo for a washed up Serge Ibaka? Like, Dante would be a huge lift for them right now. They need him. I mean, he's a huge underrated part, even though he did not make it through the playoffs because of the injury. Just a huge part of their team last year. He would fit in really well right now to guard LaVine, to help take some load off Drew. When you're talking about quick wings and more speed on the floor, that is exactly what they need right now. They don't have it. So, yeah, I don't have huge confidence in the Bucks, but I do think that they're going to come out and get this one, or at least score enough to get us over.
You hope so. I mean, you're totally right. I was listening to a podcast that I just was like, what are these guys talking about? They were kind of trashing DiVincenzo, saying like, well, if DiVincenzo's was going to be your answer, then you're in trouble anyway. And it's like, wait, I thought DiVincenzo was an asterisk on the Bucks last season when if they lost, they already had the preloaded excuse that they didn't have DiVincenzo for the entire playoffs. And the media was giving them, I say the media, plenty of media members were giving them the out to just say, oh, you don't have DiVincenzo, it's too bad, maybe he'll come back next year. Now we're trashing DiVincenzo like he doesn't matter because he didn't play on the Kings, who suck anyway. They need him. Serge Ibaka isn't even stepping on the floor. Forget the fact that DiVincenzo would help you. You traded him for someone you won't even play. So what are we talking about? Why did you make that trade? I don't know. I completely agree with you. It's kind of frustrating to see that. And you're right. Just for those who need to know, so that we don't get kind of blown up in the comments with people complaining, we use nicknames too often. B Rabbit was a reference to 8 Mile, who was played by Eminem, and we are referencing that to sort of assimilate him toward. We're saying he's like Alex Caruso, who always seems to wear a sort of B Rabbit style beanie to the post game whenever he has a good game. So it's really funny if you were watching social media with that. But Caruso had an incredible game. He's a huge reason. Also, I should give him some credit for why Drew Holiday was not Drew Holiday. Not only was Caruso forcing people to come out and guard him on against a 3 as he was hitting them, he was also just locking people up all over the floor. It was fun to watch him be healthy, right, and enjoy that game with them. So yeah, I think everything you say is right on, man. And while I'm a little bit scared, like I said, for my own personal self to bet that line right now, just because I want to see what happens, I do feel better about Giannis in the fourth quarter than anybody else, although DeMar, once again, was one of the best, if not the best, fourth quarter players this year as well. It's definitely a series without Chris Middleton. Things have flopped. I think the last time we talked about these series lines, it was minus 2,500, maybe 26. For the Suns, take off about 1,300 of that and get it down to about minus 295 on the series now for Phoenix at a 1-1 tie. And New Orleans, plus 230. It was, I believe, about plus 550. So there's some reason to believe in them now just because of the way that Ingram looked. CJ continues to look efficient all over the place in terms of his scoring and his other stats as well in terms of those rebounds and assists, which are noticeable. So we're obviously starting to look at what do the Suns do without Booker, and with the Pellies, I think it's about what do they do at home. Is there much of a difference? So with a pretty small line in this game and the Suns still favored, and then a very small total. Well, I don't know what to call it small, but 216 does feel small in this one for two teams that can't put the ball in the net, but have been playing at a pace of about 95. So there's a bit of conflicting data. I guess, how do you look at this one and what angles are you trying to find?
I'm staying away from the total. Like you said, it's a very competitive line that could go either way very easily. The way these teams both hit threes down the stretch in game 2 and the Pelicans came alive, I'd be terrified to take the under. But the over, it does not really hit without Book. The Suns went under in 5 of their latest 7 without Booker. They went 3 and 4 straight up in those games, but Chris Paul also missed 6 of them. So I don't think you read in too much of that. Chris Paul now going to see what he can do with this supporting cast without his best complementary option. And I think the Suns are still good to win. I mean, this minus 295 indicates where Vegas thinks they're at, that they're not just going to fold because one guy's out. They've adjusted to this all season, and Book carried them when Chris Paul was out. And well, now these shoes on the other foot, and CP3 has fresh legs because he missed all that time in March. So I think the Suns at -1.5, you are getting good value. This is still the most clutch team of all time in the fourth quarter. And that a lot of that is about CP3, not necessarily about Book. We highlighted some of his numbers against the Pelicans, handing out about 15 dimes per game in his last few regular season meetings. He had 14 last game. We know what he did in game 1, 30 points when he needed to score. And yeah, we just haven't seen the others that they like to talk about on the TNT. There's plenty of others for Phoenix. They're much better off the bench than they were last year, mostly because Cam Johnson is just a better player at this point. JaVale McGee is a much better backup big than they had. Cam Payne continues to get better. So, I mean, the Pelicans had a nice game, stood their ground to get one here. I don't know if Ingram can continue that kind of success against Mikal Bridges and company. And yeah, CJ is a problem for the Suns right now if they're going to use Bridges. I mean, they were using Bridges, I think, just as often on CJ, though, and could use Crowder or Cam Johnson on Ingram. But yeah, it's really a matter of can they keep Joval off the boards? Can they play the type of defense they played all season? I don't believe in the Pelicans. We've talked about it over and over. They shot 57% from three in game 2. And this is the second worst 3-point shooting team in the league all season. So I expect some regression from their offense, enough for this to be a close game down the stretch. And then I definitely favor the point guard and the most clutch team we've ever seen.
That we've ever seen. Yeah, and that's fair to call them that. I agree with you in a lot of ways. I think Brandon Ingram is normally a problem for a lot of teams, but his stats aren't blowing you. They don't blow you away, essentially, right? When he's been playing the Suns since they've been the Suns that they started, basically since last season when they got Chris Paul and became who they were. I mean, in his last roughly like 5 games or so against them, he is averaging 21 points, 5 assists, 5 boards. He's filling up the stats, but at the same time, he's got a couple of games in there with shooting percentages under 45%. One of them at under 30%. And it's interesting because I'm starting to realize what you're saying here. The last game in the regular season where he played against the Suns without CJ, 28 points in 34 minutes. With CJ. 28 points in 34 minutes because he's not being guarded by Mikal the Destroyer. So I don't like the matchup for the Suns if they put Crowder on Brandon Ingram, I like Crowder, but I still think at this point Crowder's a one-on-one defense. I don't think he can stay in front of a guy like Ingram and then get a hand up in his face enough to bother that shot. I also don't love Cam Johnson's quickness when it comes to Ingram and his slitheriness and ability to get to the basket. So I think if they're going to put anybody but Mikal on Brandon Ingram, I think he's going to continue to cook. And to be honest, if I was Monty Williams, and I'm not nearly as smart of a basketball mind as Monty Williams, but my suggestion would be to switch that up and let CJ do a little bit more, especially because once you put the ball in CJ's hands versus Ingram's hands, you've just taken away a 3-point shooter, who's a much better spot up 3-point shooter than Ingram. So I don't think you want to allow Ingram to get the ball one-on-one on the wing in a spot like he's KD, which is sort of his the guy he models his game after to a degree. There's no good matchup there unless it's Mikal, honestly. So I think you go that route. I don't really want to touch the total to your point. I do think there's some opportunity for some guys that you can pick out of the Suns lineup there and maybe find some prop value just because we know that when Book's out, there's a few guys whose minutes go up in terms of, I'm looking at Cam Payne, Cam Johnson, or Ayton. One of those 3, all of them go up in minutes. All of them go up in points. Cam Johnson noticeably from 11 points per game to 16 points per game with 5 more minutes in that stretch. He also gets an extra board and an extra assist. Then you got Cam Payne. And this is a reason that I also think CP3 goes down in productivity when Book leaves. He scores 1 less point, 1 less assist, 1 less board, 1 less 3-pointer made, all those for Chris Paul when Booker's out. I think it's at least in part because Cam Payne is now on the floor for 5 more minutes a game with CP3 as the 2 guard lineup. And it's 2 point guards now. Cam's getting 3 more points per game. He's getting 2 more assists per game. So you're putting a guy on the floor who has a lot more similar style of play to CP3 than when Book is out there to complement him. It's not like, CP3 is less effective. It's just there's another guy doing similar things to him that's taking away from his stats, but it's not necessarily taking away from the team's stats. I mean, 8-6 without him is not the winning percentage that you look for when you're a team that's 64 and what an 18 on the season, right? That's just, it's a big dip in your win percentage without Book. I think it's interesting that when you were talking about they did it with without CP3 and Booker, I think we did not give Book the credit he deserves for what he did without CP3, and I don't think we realized the sort of slight shift in credit that we should be giving Book over CP3 at times with how effective Booker is without CP3 on the floor. It's not that he doesn't need him. It's not that this team doesn't need him. It's just I think Book has proven that he's more important to this team. And it does scare me a bit. And I do see the slightest bit of value in a plus 230 series bet on the Pellies. But I want to see how this game goes, and I don't have the balls to do it. And if the Suns win this game and it does make me feel better about it, then the odds won't be there anymore and it's not worth it. So I'm not really looking to this game as a place for me to find some units, to be honest with you. We just got to be straight up about that. Like I said, I'm going to try to hit some props for some guys. And other than that, this game scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, if you bet the Pelicans plus 2,500, you got some value. True. And if you bet them plus 10,000 to win the championship, congrats on that. But yeah, I still don't think it's going to pull through. I mean, the Suns, if you doubt them, they just come back and they find a way. It's much like the Grizz were all regular season, and they were 9-3 against the spread as road underdogs. The Suns, they're -1 here. Dominant winning numbers because they're so clutch on the road. 32-9 straight up. Not a good record against the spread, but the average is 6 points per game margin of victory. 24-5 when the road favorites, a slight favorite here. Average is 8 points per game, the margin of victory. At the end of the day, I just trust Chris Paul to get this done. I trust the depth of the Suns, and I trust Monty Williams to make the proper adjustments. Again, Willie Green is still a new coach, and like we saw with the Nets, when you just have 2 good, I'm just going to slander Steve Nash real quick. When you have 2 good scorers and your game plan is let these guys go to work. Sometimes you run into a brick wall that is a good coach with a deep team that can throw a lot of different things at those 2 scorers. And I think the Suns come out and show that kind of defensive prowess in game 3.
I don't disagree, man, but this is the second video in a row I've heard you talk slander against Willie Green, and I don't think I'm going to let it go this time because he's a really, really good coach. I agree. Monty Williams is a better coach. Willie Green's a young coach. First of all, he's got that team bought in. The fact that without Zion and through turmoil throughout the season, before they even got CJ being so bad, getting CJ, who, look, CJ is a coach on the floor to himself, an amazing human being, could be a politician someday if he wanted to. So he's got to get some credit for helping that team out. But Willie Green has kept that team afloat. So I just want to shout him out because I
wanted to slander Steve Nash than
that's fair. That I will support because that man has not shown us any X's and O's that make me believe in him yet, other than KD catch. But I think Willie Green does have something to say about the way that he was able to utilize Ingram, the way that he's brought these 2 stars together. They have something. If they can get a squad together for next year, the way similar to the one they have this year, obviously add the ZW there, Zion, and see how that goes. I think there's something to be said for their future. I do agree with you. The Suns on the road, they're still super good. The Pellies at home as home dogs, which they are by, like you said, just a point, but home dogs, 8-18. Straight up. They lose by 4 points per game. They're 11-15 against the spread as home dogs, which at -1, you might as well just consider that 8-18 straight up the record you talk about. So there's not much to like with the Pellies in terms of their home, home dog stats and all that kind of stuff. And I do think the Suns pull this one out. It's the Suns in the 4th quarter, even if it's close. But we said that in this game too. We were all waiting for them to just pull it out. It was a big shock without Book. It's going to be a different game plan. They will be ready to go. Monty Williams is coach of the year. As much as I love Willie Green as a person and coach, Monty Williams is a better coach, and they'll be able to take this one down. So that is all the time we have for you. 3 fun games here on this Friday night. Hope you'll all be watching those games with us. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to follow along with us as we bring you every single game during this postseason, even those weekend ones, which we weren't bringing you during the regular season. We're going to continue to bring those during the playoffs. So until we see you next, happy betting.